I'm going to be ranking physical traits by how revolting and repelling they are to women. Traits in the S tier are the most effective at repelling women, and traits in the F tier are the least effective at repelling women. We'll start off with an easy one: short stature. Being short is pretty much a game over for most men when it comes to the dating game. The only way you can be attractive to women as a short guy is if you have at least an above average face. And you'll probably need to have a great body too. Because the only thing worse than a short man in a woman's eyes is a short man that's also fat. It really sucks being short because it's just so unfair. It's completely out of your control, and there's pretty much nothing you can do to overcome it. Yeah, sure, leg lengthening surgery exists, but it's extremely damaging to your body, and at best, it can only give you a few inches of height. So, short stature easily ranks as an S tier on the physical traits that repel women tier list. But how short is short? Where does tall end and short begin? I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but scientifically speaking, there are three categories for male height. If you are between 5'8" and 6 feet tall, you are normal and your height neither adds nor subtracts from your looks. If you are shorter than 5'8", you are short, and if you're taller than 6 feet, then you're tall. When it comes to facial features that repel women, a recessed chin, colloquially known as a weak chin, has got to be one of the worst. It's also a mostly genetic thing, so it's pretty unfair that there's not much you can do to prevent it. If you've got the weak chin genes, then you're just screwed. However, it is possible to improve a recessed chin through certain dental procedures and cosmetic procedures, and a weak chin might not necessarily ruin your whole face. I mean, if you have otherwise great facial features and cranium shape, then a weak chin might not be hurting you that much. With that said, not everyone with a weak chin can afford to get expensive cosmetic procedures, and even those that can afford it, there are major risks involved, so it's not just a simple decision. Because of all these factors, a recessed chin is an A tier physical trait that repels women. Being bald is an interesting thing because it's extremely common, but it's still considered to be extremely unattractive by the majority of women. And this is something that's rarely talked about, but being bald will also make a lot of people perceive you in a negative way. Baldness is associated in people's minds with criminality and untrustworthiness. Being bald just complements your looks no matter what kind of facial features you have, but instead of enhancing your features, it dehances them. If you have masculine features, then you'll look evil. And if you have a baby face or you have feminine features, then people will think you look creepy. Baldness just plays off all your other features, but in a bad way. Now, depending on how bald you are, you might be able to save some of your hair with medicine, or you might be able to get a hair transplant. But none of the solutions to baldness are guaranteed to give good results. But they are expensive. Being bald is extremely unfair, but if you have a great skull shape that complements your face, then you might be okay. However, if you have a skull shape that is just mediocre, or if you have an ugly skull shape, psh, all I got to say is, it is over out here for cranium cells. Baldness is in the S tier when it comes to repelling women. Now this next one is something that really does not get the attention it deserves, and I already mentioned it briefly, but a very underrated physical trait that repels women is having an ugly skull shape or having a small skull circumference. Now, whether your skull is small or it's just a regular size skull with an ugly shape, it's just a fact of life that people associate how aesthetically pleasing your skull is with how intelligent you are. So, I'm sorry to say this, but if you have a small or ugly skull, then everybody you meet probably thinks you're stupid. Of course, if you have a full head of hair, people might not actually be able to see the shape or size of your skull, so having a small or ugly skull is mostly only a huge disadvantage if you're also bald. But since it does have such potentially devastating effects on your appearance, and also since there's not much you can do to fix an ugly skull, small or ugly skull ranks in the A tier when it comes to repelling women. And by the way, if your skull is small, then it's also ugly by default. The next physical trait I'll be ranking is really a combination of traits. If you have a pear-shaped body, that means you have narrow shoulders relative to the width of your hips. And that is a very ugly physical trait for a man to have, mostly because it's just seen as feminine and weak. The opposite of the pear-shaped body is the V-shaped body, which is characterized by broad shoulders and relatively narrow hips. And that is a highly desirable trait. But even though a pear-shaped body is considered extremely undesirable to women, for most men, they can improve their shoulder width to waist width ratio significantly through weight loss and lifting weights. Of course, there are some true sub-5s out there that just got sub-5 written into their DNA, so there are some men out there that just naturally have super narrow shoulders and wide hips. So I'd have to say a pear-shaped body is in the B tier when it comes to repelling women. Pupillary distance refers to the distance between your eyes. If your eyes are too close together or too far apart, it can really ruin your appearance despite any other good features you might have. But I do think pupillary distance is a binary thing, like your eyes are either too close together or they're not. Your eyes are either too far apart or they're not. And there is a really wide range for what falls into the normal pupillary distance category, so it's actually very rare for someone to have problems with their pupillary distance. But for those of us that do have issues, and let me tell you, as a man whose eyes are way too close together, it really is just so over out here for eye distance cells. My case is kind of a weird one because one contributing factor to my very short pupillary distance is the fact that I also have a very small skull circumference, so relatively speaking, it's a bit less noticeable that my eyes are so close together. But anyway, I know some of you are probably thinking, hey wait, it's actually not that rare to see someone whose eyes are too close together or too far apart. But statistically speaking, actually it is very rare. The fact that so many people seem to think that it's actually more common than it is, that is a testament to how utterly brutal an abnormal pupillary distance can be. Abnormal pupillary distance goes in the B tier. If you have a really big nose, especially if you have a big hook-shaped nose, then there's a good chance you've noticed it having a negative impact on how attractive you are to women. However, your nose, more than any other feature, is highly dependent upon how it looks relative to all your other facial features. And I think the reason it's like that is because the nose is the most centrally located feature of the face. It's literally surrounded on all sides by other major facial features. There's also a lot you can do to remedy an ugly nose. Rhinoplasties and other procedures, or nose jobs as they're often called, are fairly low risk and inexpensive as compared to cosmetic procedures targeting other parts of the face, and you can even make a big nose look a lot smaller just by wearing big glasses. So because it's so relative and easier to fix than other traits, a big nose or a hook nose ranks in the D tier. In a lot of ways, having a small frame and being short are pretty similar. Both make you look weaker and less threatening, and they both make you take up less physical space. However, the way women perceive a man with a small frame versus a short man, there's really no comparison. Being short is so much worse than having a small frame. In fact, if you're tall, then having a small frame really won't hurt you much at all. Of course, if you have a small frame and you're short, well, I'm truly sorry for what you're going through. Having a small frame does have a big impact on how other men see you, even if you're tall, because men judge you more so based on how confident they are they could beat you in a fight to the death. But for women, height is kind of all they notice. A small frame just isn't much of a factor unless you're also short. Because of this, small frame is a F tier physical trait that repels women. If you have bad teeth, it is 100% over out here for you. Bad teeth is, without a doubt, one of the most women-repelling traits a man can have. However, no matter how bad your teeth are, you can get them fixed. It might be expensive, but the technology is out there and has been for a long time. And cosmetic dental procedures are pretty safe compared to pretty much any other cosmetic operation. And on top of that, fixing your teeth is completely socially acceptable, which stands in stark contrast to every other type of cosmetic procedure like hair transplants or nose jobs. There is truly no stigma at all associated with fixing your teeth in any way. And I considered not even saying this, but honestly, if you have bad teeth, it's probably your own fault for not brushing your damn teeth. So I really can't feel too bad for you. But I know some men are just born with really crooked teeth naturally, so I mean, I do have some sympathy there. But since bad teeth is the most easily fixed physical trait on this list, I'm putting it in the B tier. And I know some of y'all are going to disagree with that ranking because obviously we all know women really do not like men that have bad teeth, but it is what it is. You heard my reasoning. Being fat sucks. And if you're overweight, you probably know that women find you disgusting. But if you have a good enough face, then maybe you don't have that problem. The thing about being fat is that it is very effective at repelling women, but it's also pretty easy to lose weight, and if you're fat, then it's almost definitely your own fault to begin with. But even if you are fat, if you're only a little bit fat, but you have a decent face, then you can probably still attract decent quality women. So being fat isn't even a death sentence unless you're morbidly obese. But outside of the few people that have a legitimate medical reason for being fat, if you're fat, then you kinda deserve your fate. And I know, who am I to talk as a bald man with an ugly, tiny cranium? But you know what? That's not my fault. I was born with a small head, and it's not my fault I went bald either. It's just genetics. And I have been fat before. I was always a fat kid growing up, and it really does suck to be fat. Like, even aside from how poorly people treat you, it also just feels bad to be fat. Like, it's uncomfortable to bend over to tie your shoes and things like that. So, being fat is highly repellent to women, but you probably deserve it. D tier. Bad posture makes you look unathletic, sickly, and might even make you look several inches shorter than you actually are. So it goes without saying, bad posture is a woman repelling feature. Another thing about bad posture is it can make your shoulders look more narrow, which can make your body appear more pear-shaped. However, posture is one of the few physical traits on this list that can often be improved without drugs or surgery. So I'm placing bad posture in the C tier because the main reason it repels women is just because of the way it exaggerates other woman repelling traits like short stature and narrow shoulders. Nobody wants to have pimples, and nobody wants to look at somebody else's pimply skin. Acne can make you look sickly and unclean, even though in reality, some people just have really bad cystic acne due to hormonal conditions, and no amount of scrubbing and washing your face could change that. Nevertheless, if you have really bad skin, people are gonna think you eat Hot Pockets all day every day and never take showers. Oh, and by the way, if you're a teenager with bad acne, it's not going to be as bad as it is for adults with acne because acne is extremely common in teenagers. But obviously, you'd look a lot better with clearer skin no matter how old you are. But with all that said, I'm putting acne/bad skin in the D tier because believe it or not, if you have aesthetic facial features, bad skin is not going to hurt your looks all that much. Women are mostly attracted to a man's physical shape. That means facial features and other more physical features like height and shoulder to waist width ratio are completely dominant over something like bad skin. So if you already have one or more negative physical traits, then bad skin on top of that is going to make you look a lot worse. But if you're tall with a chiseled jawline and hunter eyes, your bad skin isn't going to be a major detractor. Having a weak jawline is kind of connected to having a weak chin. I mean, literally, your jawbones and chin bones are connected, so yeah. And pretty much everything I said about having a recessed chin also applies here. There's not much you can do for a weak jawline outside of expensive and risky surgical procedures, and it's also one of the more unfair women repelling traits to be addled with because it's just something you're born with. Oh, and mewing is total bullshit, by the way, just in case you didn't know. But yeah, the thing about jawlines is that a strong jawline will make you look hyper masculine, but a weak jawline will make you look like you eat your breakfast cereal with liquid estrogen instead of milk. Fortunately, you can sometimes hide a narrow jawline under a beard if it's not too bad. But if you can't grow a beard, then I guess you're just screwed. Weak jawline is easily in the A tier. Gray hair is an interesting one because it does repel women, but it doesn't repel women because it in itself looks bad. Women are repelled by gray hair because it's associated with old age and everything that goes along with it. I know a lot of people like to say that men age like fine wine, but that's BS and you know it. Women prefer men that are physically fit and mentally sharp. And if you have gray hair, then chances are your best days are behind you. However, if you have a handsome face and a great body, you can get away with having gray hair. Like at that point, it won't even matter at all. So I'm putting gray hair in the D tier. Unlike gray hair, wrinkly skin is ugly in its own right. Wrinkles actually change the shape of your face in a sense because loose skin around your jaw can make your jawline look less defined. And it's the same for pretty much every other facial feature. Of course, for the vast majority of men, wrinkles aren't going to be a problem until you're at least like 50 something. And if you're already that old, then wrinkles might not be the worst of your problems anyway. Nevertheless, wrinkles go in the A tier because they pretty much do ruin your face. Big ears is another one of those traits that it's just really highly dependent on other features like your skull shape and how bald you are. In fact, as long as you have a full head of hair, your big ass floppy elephant ears might not even be noticeable. And some guys actually look good with big ears. It really just depends. But for most men, if you have really big ears that stick out from the side of your head like a satellite dish, well, let's just say women are not going to want to come near you. But hey, at least you might still be able to hear them making fun of you from an unusually large distance. Big ears are in the C tier because, like I say, it really depends. Okay, so there you have it. I know I didn't cover every single possible physical trait that repels women, but I covered a lot of them, so whatever.